Okay, you are a plant person and you love putting stuff in your yard and you're trying to make the selection for what kind of plants should go where in your yard. Well, I made a list of 5 questions you have to ask before you put any plants in your yard. And then I got 5 questions after that that are the next level questions that if you want to be really pro about it, how you ask. So we've put thousands of plants in people's yards. We've seen some really creative things from other companies, some real silly decisions, and in fact, we've honestly made some mistakes ourselves, and we've learned a lot in the process. So I want to share a lot of those lessons with you and give you those first 5 questions, and then we'll keep going to the next 5 if you want those as well. So the first 5, number one is how much sunlight does the area that in question get? Now you can kind of break this down into 3 different categories: full sun, partial sun, shady. Now you can break those down even further by saying like full sun is more like 6 hours of sunlight a day. Partial would be 3, and then shady would be less than 3 hours of sunlight a day. And that will make a huge difference in the type of plants you can choose. Now we're going to talk more about how to research those plants and stuff in a second, but know the area that you are trying to plant in first, because it will make a tremendous impact on whether or not the plants will thrive or not, and in many cases die if you don't know it. One note here that you need to understand is the microclimate. What I mean by microclimate is the specific area, um, aside from just the shade that is happening there, because the afternoon sun is actually much hotter and more um, like powerful because it's hotter than the morning sun. So like 6 hours in the morning of light is a different thing than 6 hours of light in the afternoon. So just to take note of that, as you're choosing these plants. The next question is equally important, and we're kind of in the top 2 questions here. Is how much water does this plant need? And that seems obvious, but a lot of people will mix and match in one bed or one irrigation zone, one plant that needs a lot of water and one plant that needs very little water. And the thing about your irrigation zone is you can't really change. I mean, the zone is the zone. You can't really change how much water this plant gets versus this plant gets. There are some little irrigation tweaks you can do with specific nozzles or bubblers, but in general, the zone is the zone. So don't put a bunch of plants that need a lot of water next to a bunch of plants that don't need very much water. Typically, a lack of water is what's killing plants in the Austin area, but um, it does happen where a plant can get too much water, and that will be the cause of the plant not succeeding or dying. The way that I would answer this is just doing your research online. We're working on a database right now to be able to answer those kinds of questions, but right now there's a lot. There are some resources out there that you can dig through to see how much water something needs. Again, don't overcomplicate this. Does it need a lot? Does it need a moderate amount? Or does it not need very much at all? Like a xeric plant, a cactus doesn't need very much at all, whereas a tropical plant needs quite a bit of water. The third question, we're on 3, is what kind of soil do you have? Now, in Austin alone, there are different kinds of soils. In general, the hills are made of limestone, have more rocky soil. That's the hills. Whereas, and that's kind of West Austin, um, moving farther west or more into the hills. South and a little bit southeast has more of like a rocky clay soil. It's more compacted usually, whereas East Austin has more like deeper soils, but they're still pretty alkaline. Know the soil, understand that certain plants like certain types of soil. You can do some adjustments, but you will need to do that if it's a plant that needs non-alkaline soils. You can dig a hole, pour water into it, see how well it drains. If it doesn't drain very well, you're learning. Okay, the fourth question. Can this plant handle my climate? We're in zone 8B. There are these zone things. You can look up a map across the United States of what zone we're in from planting, and all plants are categorized at nurseries by their zone. Most of the stuff sold at local nurseries is sold for a reason because it will work well here. If you're someone that's looking for a plant that doesn't do well here, it's probably harder to find, or the nursery is not very knowledgeable. Um, understand that it is okay to use plants outside of zone 8B, but the farther you get outside of that zone, the more work you're going to have to do to help it thrive. If it's something that thrives natively here, like you find it in the green belt, then it's going to be a lot easier to take care of and it's not going to need very much like coddling from you. The farther you get away, the more you're going to have to protect it in the cold or baby it in the heat in order for it to succeed. Even if you want to baby it, if it's a native plant, babying a native plant is going to be amazing. It'll thrive. So just be careful. Recognize that if you have this one plant that you love, but it's not from here, you're gonna have to do a lot to in the beginning and while it's alive to help it succeed. It's possible. A lot of people do it, but takes quite a bit of effort. Um, you can Google or use some other resource to search the name of the plant plus USDA zone, and that will give you some more context. And if you want to search like a map, USDA zone map, that will help you as well when you think about these things. Okay, 5. This one's honestly overlooked a lot, and that's confusing to me. People make mistakes with this all the time. How big will this plant get at maturity? Um, Oftentimes, people overplant beds because they want it to look good today, because I did the work today. What that means is that you, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 7 years from now, are going to have a way overgrown bed. Or maybe they plant a shrub in front of a window. The shrub's going to get way too big and cover the window. Or another common one is a crepe myrtle is a crepe myrtle, right? Well, that's not the case. What happens is they'll plant a crepe myrtle variety that will grow to 40 feet next to a crepe myrtle that will grow to 15 feet because there are different varieties of crepe myrtle. And you have to know these things and research them up front so that you don't make those mistakes. Okay, we could talk about that a lot, but let's go straight. So those are like the 5 you have to ask. Again, that list is how much sun, what kind of sun, how much water, um, what kind of soil can this plant handle my climate, and then finally, what's the maturity size of this plant? Now, that's the first you have to ask. Here's 5 more that will help you level up, and I'll go a little bit quicker on this. So, and then I'll do one bonus one at the end. So what are the next 5? So blooming. Does this plant bloom? How often does it bloom? For how long? And what color? Again, you don't want to have 4 white crepe myrtles and then plant a red crepe myrtle next to it, unless you're trying to, which would be weird. So just understand the variety that you're putting in. And then a lot of people will hear out their blooming. They'll have different plants that bloom at different times of the year so that their yard gets continuous blooms or more irregular blooms than otherwise not. Number 7, is it prone to pest or disease? Seems fairly self-evident, but there are some plants that are commonly used and sold that are highly prone to disease. A good example of this is red tip photinias. They were very common in the 80s and 90s. They become less common in large part because they get fungal diseases and suffer a lot if they get a lot of water on them that isn't quickly and rapidly dried off. Number 8, what kind of maintenance does it need? You may not care about this. You may love doing the work. Some people don't want to do any work. Know what kind of maintenance you are needed on this plant. You can do some quick research. 10 minutes now will save you tens of hours of a season in the future. Another one, is it helpful or harmful to wildlife? Some plants are invasive. Um, some plants are poisonous. Other plants are pollinators and are great for things like bees. And if you want to support the bee population, you can choose some pollinating plants that are great for them. The last question here is it easy to find and affordable? Um, some things we find online look beautiful and we can't find them, so don't buy those things. Or make sure you understand that if it dies or you've got 4 of them and one of them dies, it might be hard to replace. And then when it comes to affordable, recognize that some plants are much easier for a nursery to grow. In fact, sometimes it's cyclical. Sometimes this year, one type of plant is much more readily accessible and therefore cheaper than another year. Um, in the process of making these decisions, you may choose to go with 3 gallons instead of 10 gallons, knowing that you're going to have to wait several years to catch up because you want to do more of your yard instead of just making the front bed look big and beautiful. And this gives me to my bonus question, which is, what's your budget? Because if you don't have an ideal budget at the beginning of what you want to spend on these plants, and if you're hiring someone to labor to put in that plant, then you don't understand how big of a project you could think about designing. Now, don't forget about the additional products. You don't need a ton of them, but sometimes amending the soil can be helpful in the success. A fertilization program can also help in the establishment and growth of these plants as well. Keep those in mind when you're looking at your budget. If you want to know more, we've got a lot written on this. We would love to help you. Hope it's helpful. Can't turn off the video. Have a great day.